Welcome to the Tea with Tamara podcast. I'm Tamara Arnold, and it wasn't that long ago that I was a broke single mom drinking way too much, completely detached from everything. Now I've written multiple books, downloaded I Could Read Chakras, and I'm a channel for the universe. I'm a real person with real stories, and I can't wait to share them with you. So grab a warm bevy and let's have some enlightened conversation to live our best life.
All right, magical beings of light. Today is a true gift for me to be able to introduce you to someone who holds probably one of the dearest places in my heart. I said I wanted to cry before we even started today's episode, but I have here my biz bestie, one of true bestie, someone who I have spent the last 2.5 years growing my business beside, step by step, every move I've made. Liz Lajoie has been there to truly honor and hold sacred everything that I'm doing in my business, and I'd like to think it's been, the other way around as well. But today we are going to be having a really, really deep conversation about different areas of our lives and business that maybe you guys don't see.
First of all, yes, it has been a really great journey with you. Your listeners who don't know, Tamara and I are like the opposite ends of the same person, which is a really interesting thing that we connected. But yeah, so much hidden stuff to talk about.
And I think it's really important to say hidden stuff because I really truly want to go deep into something that I don't think you necessarily share often about, because I think it's an important piece to really help support other entrepreneurs who may be going through something similar. But just to kind of give a little synopsis of who you are, Liz, and what you do, can you just spend a moment and introduce yourself to the wonderful people listening?
Sure. So I am the founder of the Zen Money Initiative. And what the heck does that mean? We work with entrepreneurs primarily in the online space, helping them get their money shit in order. I can swear, right?
Oh, fuck yeah.
Okay. So what does that mean? So many of us are just wrangled up around, we want to make money. We have this great business. We want to serve clients. But at the end of the day, it's what do we do with it, right? So we help people long-term, which is a relationship actually that you and I have, Tamara, but also we do a lot of training, and I love to just really dive in and say, okay, what do you need to know? What do you not have to worry about? And ultimately, how can we build a great, strong strategy to grow your business? So I serve as CFO for a lot of businesses, many entrepreneurs in the solopreneur space or small business stuff ramping up. And then we also have clients who are more traditional, kind of boots on the ground sort of scenarios. So we get to see a lot of different things, which is super exciting for me because my background is in small business management, but it's fun to be able to see different businesses from the back end, the inner workings, if you will. So we support people that way, making good choices, managing their money, making sure their taxes are done on time, ticky-tacky stuff, but also mindset stuff around why do we not want to look at it, which a lot of us don't.
True story. She knows that deeply about me. When I met Liz, I glazed over anytime she said profit and loss, whether she said, even if you said money, I think I would be like, I think I don't want to have this conversation right now.
The word finance just was like, oh my God, I can't.
Squirrel.
Well, and what's funny is you were at that point, and at that stage when because I had it had been 6 or 9 months that I'd moved into the online space when you and I met. And I was at the opposite end of that spectrum in terms of being everybody knows you just have to do the stuff. So I wasn't fully connected to the fact that I have to watch my language because it triggers so many people in crazy ways.
Yeah. So guys, we're going to say some triggering words on today's podcast. Just warning you about that.
It totally flies out of my mouth without me realizing it. That's the problem. So it's
not a problem. It's just, it's because but let's be straight. Have you always known you wanted to play in the money pool?
God, no. Fuck no. My background was so here's the thing, right? I grew up with successful, professional, medically oriented people who, right, did well. And I think they thought we were all going to like learn about money through osmosis. I don't remember a lot of, specific conversations around like even personal money, right? How to manage it, how to save, how to take care of things. It was just kind of like, well, we know things are, you'll learn by what we do kind of thing. And I think that's true for a lot of people. And so there's this void in financial education. And the thing about money management is it really isn't that hard. I mean, we're talking like 5th grade math most of the time, right? What's coming in, what's going out, what's left over. Pretty basic stuff. But we're not trained in it. It's not part of a daily conversation for a lot of us. And because of that, it becomes kind of terrifying. And so we learn these money management things kind of on the fly through watching people around us, but we don't necessarily have the background for it to understand how to really use it to our advantage. Like you have a story around how you used to watch your mom write out checks and stuff, right?
Yeah. So she would be balancing her checkbook. And, that was when I first started to delve deep into what my money story was, that was that moment of like, okay, when I was watching her and I was being told we didn't have money for anything, the lesson that she did teach me that was really good was you always make sure your bills are paid first before you look to see what anything else is left over. I didn't necessarily learn that as a kid. What I was learning is we didn't have any money. Mm-hmm. What I picked up or what resonated.
A deeper message, right? It wasn't the superficial, like day-to-day stuff. It was more of the what you absorbed, kind of.
Yeah. What was your first money memories?
I don't know, to be honest with you. You've asked me that before. I remember like one cool thing that my dad did when we were in high school is this isn't my earliest money memory, but he would give us like not an allowance, but he would give us like book money. So every month we get like $20 that was supposed to be dedicated to go and actually buy books. This was back when you bought actual books from the bookstore, right? Like, and things like that instead of on a Kindle. And that was always fun. I think there was, I grew up with a lot, my parents split when I was young and like 4. And so I lived in a single mom household, but then it was very distinct between like the life that I lived most of the time with my mom. And then we would go and visit my dad as a doctor. And there was a lot more abundance, if we want to call it that, going around. And so there was like this big dichotomy around money for me, I think. But back to your question, like, how did I get into this? Like everybody, right? Very random path, as it were. I was a Latin American studies major in college, and I thought I was going to be like in the humanities kind of world. And I worked for a nonprofit right out of school, a medical nonprofit helping kids with heart disease around the world. That was cool. And then I moved from that to corporate banking, like as an admin. And then I ran away to Prague and taught English for a while, and that was really great. And then I came back to the States, and I went to work for a family business. And I started learning a lot around business there in that capacity. And then my next position was really the one that solidified things, in that I became a business manager worked up into the role of business manager and partner for a local engineering firm. And I got my MBA paid for and really honed my, like, how do we run a business in a way that puts money on the bottom line, but still gets done what needs to get done? How do we write contracts? How do we, like, all the things, business managery type things. So that's kind of where the real money stuff started to come into play in my adulthood, really.
Okay, so like I just learned 2 things about you that I didn't know in the last 2.5 years, that we've been friends. One being that you worked for a nonprofit that helped kids with heart problems. That's a thing. Like, can we side story? Can I hear about that for a moment?
Yeah, it was one of those right out of college. I went to school at a small liberal arts college in Minnesota. My background is I grew up in Minnesota. I don't live there anymore, but I have a lot of family there and a lot of connections. And so I moved to the Twin Cities, to Minneapolis, after college, and a family friend who's very well connected, like, I was looking for a job, and she's like, I know this person who I went and did this like women's charity like thing in somewhere in Europe together. These are big, like, highfalutin people that my family happens to know. And so she connected me. She was like, I think she's looking for somebody, and let me just make a connection. So I'd been sending out resumes and stuff, but this one stuck, through the networking, which is always the bottom line there of like, the people make a difference in your life. It's amazing. And so, yeah, that's what it was. I mean, my family, as I said, is medically oriented. My dad and my stepmom are doctors. My mom was a certified nurse midwife for 30 years. So I grew up like, I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV. Like that's what our household was like. So, and my family was very, like my parents built clinics in Central America. And so it was a good fit for a first job out of school. So that particular, I was working as like the and everything else girl, right? Like an administrative coordinator. So like I had to put out newsletters and stuff a bunch of envelopes and help track like event stuff. And
I just find it so interesting, right? Because you know me and you know that you couldn't have paid me $1 million to step into a cubicle or into an office ever, you guys. Like that is the polar opposite. So I'm always fascinated when I hear this. But I actually want to ask a random question here, because I know that you're just kind of saying it like it's normal that both your dad and your stepmom were doctors and like that was just the way things were. But tell me what that was like in terms of, did you see them? Like, was this like, because really I want to bring attention to what will later be a conversation about your habits and behaviors.
This podcast is going to be so long. Yeah, well, in terms of like money stuff, let's bring it back to that because it's really interesting to grow up.
No, I don't want to talk about the money stuff. I want to talk about, what it was like to have a doctor and a stepmom who was a doctor. Like in terms of visibility and support and all of those kinds of things and I'm not saying that we don't love our parents, you guys, and I'm just saying from the standpoint of what were the lessons you were learning in that moment in your life.
Here's what I learned from all of my parents, really, actually. I learned that work is super important and that has two edges to it, right? On the one hand, it's important to do work that really makes a difference. And that's what I learned, right? Like if you're in the medical profession, especially for people of that generation, it is very much, for many of them, a labor of love. So my parents worked very hard, cared very deeply about their patients, and that often took precedent over us. So for example, I don't know if I ever told you this story, but when I was 7, so this was, again, single mom. My mom has a pretty cool story. She might hear this sometime, and I don't know how she's going to feel about this. But after my parents' divorce, we moved to a small town in northern Minnesota where my mom basically created a midwifery program. They hadn't had midwives, within their clinic and a hospital system before that. So for a couple of years before she got a partner, my mom was on call 24/7 with me and my brother. I was 6 when we moved up there. So young kids, younger than my kids now. Like, I don't even know how she did it, to be honest with you. And she had backup from other OBs and other docs and stuff like that. But basically, she was primary, right, responsibility. So my 7th birthday was supposed to be a sleepover. And we had to cancel it because somebody else was, getting born on my birthday. And I barely remember that story. But for my mom, it was like this major failure or guilt or something around all of that, right? Like that she couldn't have this happen for me. And so I just, as an adult, as you become a parent, you're like, wow, there's a lot of struggle that happened that when you're a kid, you don't really realize, right? So my parents taught me that work was really important and that's a good thing, but that also it often takes precedent over your family or me as a person. I got a lot of that for sure.
Did you see them do any self-care for themselves? Like, did they ever
No. Oh, no. My dad to this day, and he's, where are we at? 70, 71. My dad to this day will go and decide that he's going to roof a house by himself, and just do it and then get up there and get leg cramps and stuff because he hasn't hydrated well enough, right? Just because they're medical people doesn't mean that they know how to take care of their body. So yeah, I learned really well that there's a lot of should, because my mom's a big skier, for example, cross country. We cross country skied a lot when I was a kid, and I remember having to get dragged out of the house because I just wanted to read and hide myself in a great book, right? Just disappear into that. That's how I spent my childhood. So getting me out and active, I think, was probably always a chore for her. But I didn't see a lot of there wasn't a lot of conversation about why it was important. So it just became this should, right? Self-care, whether it's exercise or eating well or whatever it was. We ate well and all of that kind of stuff. But it definitely, there wasn't conversation. There wasn't here's what you need to learn, kid, kind of stuff going on. I don't know how it was in your house, and maybe all of us are like that. I try to be very conscientious with my kids now in terms of being very specific about here's why I do certain things and here's why we want you to do certain things, because I think that's a better way to learn than through osmosis.
Well, in my house, because, growing up around mental illness and such, right, nobody had strategies in place to actually support what it was that they were going through, whether it was anxiety, depression, or, I could say more, but I'm not going to because I'm not supposed to talk about certain people in my family, but like, again, my entire being is, okay, that didn't work for them. So how can I allow it to work for me? And then how can I teach it towards my children, which is basically what you're saying there too, right? Mm-hmm. But I want to actually get to the place in your story, Liz. So we know that, you had very busy parents who believed in everything that they were doing, and they were putting in.
They loved us. They did the best they could. There was no intention, neglect or anything. I'm not saying that.
Absolutely. But I think that knowing and understanding the why, like what happened to us as children, is essential to understanding the decisions that we make when they happen, right? Because I know your story, I'm going to just kind of jump ahead a little bit to when you were working in this corporate position. Yeah. Right?
You call it corporate, I call it small business, but yes, it's the same thing.
Did you dress up and put heels on every day?
I didn't have to put heels on every day because I live in northern New Hampshire, so like the expectation is lower. But if we were a different kind of engineering firm, or rather if our engineering firm was, say, in Concord, yes, I would have had to. Yeah. So, I mean, it was an official office position, which I know for you, you're like,
That's corporate. You are a partner in a business that makes.
I was a partner in a multi-million-dollar business. Yes, I was.
Okay, that's corporate to me. Like, I'm just putting that out there. And for anyone who has a home-based business, that feels corporate to them too.
Totally, 100%.
So as we're rolling into you get into this, like, again, partner, multi-million-dollar company, responsible for everything. I would love to talk about the part of your story where all of a sudden your energy gets a little low.
Oh, yeah. So I write about this in my first book, probably my second one too. But basically, I tanked my system in a big bad way because I know now that I'm addicted to stress, which I think a lot of us are in one way or another. But at the time, I was, within a 6-year period, I started a new career with my engineering firm. I got married. Well, no, I got married. I started my career like 3 weeks later. I started that job 3 weeks later, and it turned into a career. I didn't know it was going to be that at the time. I thought it was just a placeholder job. And then 10 years later, I was business manager and partner and part owner and all this stuff. So, but basically in a really short amount of time, I got married, started that career. I had 2 kids back to back. My kids are 19 months apart. I bought into this business and all the ownership transition stress and everything along with that, financial stress along with that. And I was getting my MBA at night, in my free time when my kids were. My son, I think, was 3 when I started. My daughter was a year, right? Like she was less than a year when I started my MBA program because I can do all the things, right? It was very externally focused, and the reason that I got my MBA, which I don't regret getting my MBA, taught me a lot. But at the time, right, I was working in an industry with people with letters after their names, professional service providers, right? Like professional engineers. And at the time, I was the only non-technical partner, or ramping up to be the only non-technical partner in our firm. And the founder of our firm and a mentor of mine was like, firmly believed that I couldn't have an equal place at the table if I also didn't have letters after my name. Our firm also had a history of like paying for other people's MBAs. We wanted to actually run it like a real business, which a lot of professional service firms, when they're starting out especially, is kind of hodgepodge. So I learned how to run a business really well because of all of that. But I took on a lot of stuff because of other people's expectations of me. That's what I'm trying to say. So that all led up to the fall of 2012 when I just started to feel like shit. And lots of tests in a short amount of time, some erroneous antibiotic treatments later, 3 trips to Maiden Med, MRI, spinal taps. Basically, people said, we don't know what's wrong with you.
So can we just rewind just a second here? Because to get to a place of doing all of those tests, right? Because right now we're just like, I'm really, really busy. I'm taking on all these things. Now I'm having a spinal tap. There has to be.
That's kind of how it felt though. Like that, like in my head, there was no like in between, but you're right. There was in between.
There has to be some signs, symptoms, things that are going on that are making you go like, something's not right now. I need to see a doctor.
Okay. So you're going to make me tell all the stories. I'm going to get graphic. I hope that's okay.
I love graphic.
Or personal. And I'm okay saying that in this capacity, which is great because as you know, I'm a pretty private person. But here's the thing. I had mastitis really badly with both my kids. And I had a really
That's the breast thing, just right? Like
So like when I was breastfeeding, I had bacterial infection and inflammation and all this stuff, which makes it hard to continue breastfeeding. And it's a really bad bacterial infection, which if left untreated, can go septic and all of that bad stuff. So I'd had this history. And so then I started to feel in the fall of 2012, I started to feel discomfort on my left side again. And that left side is where I'd had a major abscess. Oh, and you had asked about how medicine works in my family. I never had like a usual like doctor. Like my stepmom, would just randomly fill out the camp forms and be like, did you grow this year? I don't know. Sure. Right. Like that's kind of how medicine worked in my life. And so I was, getting treated by my family for my first round of mastitis. Because my stepmom was my PCP, my primary care provider here in the States. And we were just she's taking it based on what I'm telling her, right? We weren't doing physical exams or anything like that. So 6 weeks into like this oral antibiotic treatment with my son for the mastitis, they were over for Sunday dinner, right? And I'm like, Heidi, it's just still not feeling like it's clearing. I'm still tired all the time and whatever. And so she finally, we go into the office and she does a palpation. She goes, oh my God, we have to go to the clinic right now. So the cool thing is my family at that time owned a clinic, right? So Sunday night, we drive to the clinic, Heidi and I, and she needles this mass and pulls out like cc's worth of gunk that I've been carrying around for weeks because we don't do medicine the way like official medicine in my family. I mean, we do, but we don't, right? And that was like, okay. And at that point, my son was 6 months. I had to wean him and just get myself healthier. But like that's that anyway. So I knew what that felt like, and it felt shitty. So in fall of 2012, I felt like I'd been run over by a truck, right? You just hit a brick wall. It's that what I thought was as bacterial infection. Turns out I was right, but it was Lyme bacteria, and I tested negative like 3 or 4 times. I didn't get any of those indicators because those tests are like 65% false negatives a lot of time, and just the non send your blood to a lab in California versions. And so they just didn't know what was wrong with me, but I felt run over by a truck. I had like tenderness and discomfort in my left side, which I now know is I had massive, and I still do massive lymphatic issues. And when I'm flaring up, that's where it hits first, like my left shoulder area down my left side. So all of that was going on, didn't know what it was. Like, okay, it feels like a bacterial infection. Let's put you on antibiotics. But that gave me neuropathy and like tingling, and I couldn't stand up straight. And that's what catalysted the spinal taps and the MRI.
Okay, but I just want to
tell a story. It's freaking me out.
No, but I just want to kind of bring awareness because for people that are listening, I want them to hear the capacity in which you ran on adrenaline. You were addicted to the stress hormones, right? So you had a false sense of energy that was flowing through your body, because the way that you describe this is like, I went, and then all of a sudden I was hit with a wall. Like the actual leading like signs and symptoms and are not even in part of your story based on the fact that you go.
It's just normal, right? Like it was just, you just do the things. And I don't know that I was always like that, but it kind of just snowballed,
ramped up,
right? Until you're like, I must be always right. And I was honest to God, like, we talked about alcohol a lot between the two of us too, right? Like I had gotten to the point where I was burning out all of my energy through the day. And then I was coming home and I was using wine to help like give me a sugar boost to get through, making dinner and putting the kids to bed and working on my MBA. And then just like, I mean, it was just the sugars and it was all bad, but I didn't know it was bad, right? On the surface, it was all the like, oh, the things are going and I'm keeping all the plates spinning and I'm, life is magical. It was, until the bottom fell out, because it had to fall out at some point. So for me, it fell out. And it falls out for people in different ways. But for me, it fell out because, and I don't remember if I actually got a tick bite or if I'd been carrying the Lyme bacteria around in my body since I was a kid in Minnesota. And then all of a sudden my immune system finally was like, screw you, we can't take it anymore. We'll never know. I don't remember getting, there was no bullseye or whatever. But basically, we went through this whole process and there was nothing coming back in traditional lab work. So at the end of the day, they were kind of like, well, I guess we'll call it fibromyalgia. And good luck. So I went 3.5 years down a medical rabbit hole. And again, remember, I'm like, have seen the back behind the curtain of the medical field. So I'm like not super trusting in general. And so I'm always like, I can figure it out. Sure. People I know aren't giving me any answers. I'll just start researching. So 3.5 years of kind of falling backwards into a Lyme diagnosis. At some point, I started working with a functional medicine doc locally. And she was the first to be like, okay, so your adrenals are all kinds of fucked up. We should look at that. I started playing around with diet and yoga and, whatever I could to kind of just feel better. And at the same time, I was still trying to crawl my way back to normal at my space at the table within my firm. And it was a bad, in retrospect, like it was 3 years of not good stuff. So basically 3.5 years later, I finally got a true Lyme diagnosis after my hormonal situation was all kinds of screwed up. Like I was just not good for a long time. I haven't been good for a long time, but I'm much more knowledgeable about what's going on with me now.
So I just want to go back a little bit. So it was 2012 that you started to kind of do the testing with the spinal tap and the other things. And then, so it was really 2015. So 3 years of looking into all sorts of answers that weren't the right answer.
They were like part of the right answer, right? But they weren't, they were like pieces of the puzzle that made a lot of sense. Once in the spring of 2016, I actually had a full like battery of Lyme workup sent, out of pocket expense sent to California and did Lyme work. Because I was working with I went to somebody specifically for hormonal issues because I was getting to the point where the middle of the month, I literally thought I was going to kill my children or I'd have to leave my family. Like it was like incredibly, incredibly hard. And I just kept thinking I could just figure it out, right? This is the problem with me. I'm like, I'll just wait and I can just do it. It's fine. I don't need help. Which is ridiculous. But so I started working with somebody and she's like, can we I know it's a lot out of pocket, but I would really like you to do this test because I want to rule out Lyme, because if that is Lyme, then it's going to change how we address this, right? Like if we'll know if it's truly hormonal or not, or if it's ancillary to something else. And that test came back positive. And it was like,
so I'm just curious,
everything that had happened before just made sense, right?
Can I just ask how much a Lyme test is in the States at that time in spring of 2016? Just because awareness, right? Like
$500 out of pocket.
500. Okay, because I'm Canadian, right? People forget that. So we don't have to pay for those kinds of things. So I'm just curious to have something diagnosed in that way. What do you have to come up with, like just to get the answer to something?
I did the math for this year alone. Sometimes I don't, honestly, there were years where I wasn't adding up how much I was paying out of pocket because I just couldn't face it. It's an amazingly demoralizing situation to have something wrong with, I'm going to cry now too, having something wrong with you that normal, I'm using air quotes here, normal medicine doesn't think is a thing, doesn't believe in. Most docs are like, if you have Lyme, you treat it with antibiotics for 28 days and you're done. There is no such thing as chronic Lyme disease. There is no such thing as whatever, blah. It's crap. What happens with Lyme when you don't treat it initially is that there's really sneaky million-year-old bacteria who know how to survive, and they spiral into your cells, and they morph and they change, so your body can't even see it. The tests don't see it as a thing. And it causes your body to do all kinds of crazy stuff, including hormonal ups and downs and feeling like crap and aches and pains. And it shows up for people in different ways. For me, when I'm really having a bad flare-up, I feel really crappy, but I don't necessarily have a ton of brain stuff, except that if I'm really overdone, then like I can't form sentences. Like the end of the day, I'll just be like, I have to go lay down. I can't talk to my children, because literally the words that I want to say will not come to mind. And if they do come to mind, they cannot come out of my mouth. So it's a really interesting balance between trying to be a professional person who, is good at what she does and is capable, and then having these moments of just complete and utter incapacity.
Well, and I want to get back to that and how it affects you in the present day, but I want to go into the 2012 to 2016 again, only because I think that there's something to be said for the determination and the resiliency of, I know that something's wrong. I believe I can figure it out, but I'm still going to, continue working at this full-time job. I'm still going to, do the best level of parenting that I can, even if I feel like I'm going to kill my children right now. I'm going, you know what I mean? Like, you did 4 years. At this point, you're still working for the firm. Is this correct?
Yeah, and it got to a point where I couldn't work full time, and I kept trying to get back to full time, and then I'd tank again. And my partners were very flexible with me, as flexible as they could be through this whole journey that everybody on the surface, on the outside, was like, we don't understand it. We don't really know, but we'll do the best we can, because obviously you're suffering, and we'll just, and my biggest priority, and this says a lot about where my brain was for so long. And this is the, work is most important message, right? My priority was always to, no matter what, my struggle was to make sure that nothing dropped at work. And it didn't, but it was at a detriment to my family, and it was at a detriment to my own health.
Nothing dropped at the firm, but my personal space and life and everything,
I didn't know about self-care, if we want to use that phrase now, right? Like, I didn't know how to take care of myself. I'd never been taught how to consciously take care of myself, and that's, I think, true for a lot of people.
So then it's the spring of 2016. Is that when you physically, humanly just could not go to work anymore? Like, did it get to that? Did it get to that point?
No, what was interesting was because I'd figured out how to manage. I mean, I don't even know how I did this. Like, I never, I guess my constitution is strong enough that I was able to kind of just keep limping along, Some people would have just been bedridden and been like, to hell with it. I didn't feel like I could do that. Again, that go, go, go. You have to just show up and figure it out and push through mentality somehow was combined with the, not completely tank system. Somehow my immune system was sort of still okay, so I could kind of do it. But at our firm, we had a really great sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? See, this is where the words don't come. Supportive. We wanted to be very supportive of our staff, and that included we could take, leaves of absence if it was approved and it worked out and all that. So I was going to take a month off in the summer because my husband's a teacher, and we were going to take a month off and do some stuff with the kids. And then when I got the Lyme diagnosis, my husband actually was like, why don't you just move that up and take the month of June off while the kids and I are still in school and try to get a handle on this, try to rest and recuperate. And so me being me, I built a business instead.
So that's when you were, so there had to have been some sort of knowing that getting up and going out of the house and going to
it was partly that. It was partly that, to be honest with you. I mean, at that point, even still, I loved our clients. I loved the people that I worked with. I loved my staff and my team. I thought that was going to be my job for the rest of my life. I wanted it to be. I wasn't really looking for an exit strategy consciously, I don't think. But I had also I'd gotten to a point where there were friends, and I'd done some work for family and people who were in small businesses who had asked for advice around financial management and business decisions and things like that. And so I'd started doing some stuff on the side a little bit, right? Just as kind of to help them out on the weekends kind of thing. And it was never my intention to make that my full-time job until we just got to a point where it was very clear with the Lyme diagnosis that I needed to figure out some kind of way to switch it up. And it was a few months before I was officially done with my partnership, but it was all trending toward that. So I have to say, I mean, people talk about having these major traumatic experiences in their life being the catalyst to wonderful things, but it's true. Like if I hadn't gotten Lyme, I would be in a job trying to maintain a position at a place where I wasn't really thriving. I mean, I thought I was, but it wasn't a good fit for me overall. Like what I'm doing now is so much more fulfilling and it feels so much better. If we want to talk energy, is like the right alignment for my gifts and what I can help people do. So it's silver lining is that it's gotten me on the right track.
I agree. But I still think that, it's so fascinating to me to hear this and be me, right? Which is like, okay, so clearly the universe already knew that this was going to be something that you needed to have 1 month off and be like, I'm going to really set everything in motion or do some framework or some, foundational work that would in turn out to be. So like that gets you to the end of 2016 when you left the firm more or less, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And basically it was like, okay, I have to figure this out, but I can figure this out from home. I can figure it out without expectations from other partners and other obligations and things like that. I can build something of my own, which was very daunting and felt exhausting, but at the same time was kind of liberating because I knew that I was like, all right, at the very least, if nothing else, I can be an online bookkeeper, like flat on my back in bed if I have to, right? Like that I can do something because I felt such a drive to be a breadwinner in our house, right? And this is nothing to like, my husband would have been okay being like, we can take care of it. But, he's a teacher and that's a really thin lifestyle. If you're living on one teacher's salary, that's not great. That's not easy to do in today's world with 2 kids. And so I very much felt like I had to be participating financially. And also I needed something for my brain because while my body feels crappy a lot of the time, that doesn't mean like I'm sleeping all day or I need something to do that feels productive. And not just like veg out on Netflix 24/7.
Right. And so like I met Liz in truth a year after she left her corporate. So we met at the tail end of 2007.
No,
it was tail end of 2016.
It was right then. We met right after I had officially it was right in that time frame when we both decided we were going to write books.
Yeah. What? Remember those people? No. Those end of 2016 people? I barely remember. That was so, and I like to tell this story. So Liz does not like when I tell this story because we were on our.
I secretly do, but
I know because energy is everything, and we were on this call with a bunch of other authors in this new program, and I didn't know anybody. And you've just signed up for that was the most expensive thing I've ever paid for in my life. It was like a new car. Yeah. And to write this book. And so you're just sitting there and you're like, almost like, what did I do? Oh my goodness, this was the biggest expense I've ever made. This has got to pan out. Like that's my mindset. And then randomly in my Facebook Messenger, ping, while we're on the call, and in so many words, it went along the lines from Liz, and you've just heard Liz explain how analytical and left side brain she is. She was like, I really like your energy, like kind of thing. And
the funny thing about it is I didn't remember what I'd written because I think it was in something that it was like in the chat in Zoom, so it went away. We never saw it again. Or you found it?
No, it was not. It was a messenger. I scrolled all the way back to it one day to show you.
But I'd forgotten until she showed me like a year later. I'm like, I didn't say energy. That doesn't sound like me. And she's like, you totally did.
Right. And so I think that that's a really powerful
God. It's ridiculous. Start.
Because
in the most awesome way. Like it's just what I like about that story is it's so not standard, right? Like it's you were hiding, which is usually what I do, or you were wanting to hide, and I was the one who reached out, which is just not our normal MO. But I think it was something was guiding us to meet.
Well, and I think that the true friendship, you bring out the best in each other, right? Like that is what makes a friendship thrive and grow. And, you know, there was something that needed to occur between you and I. And, you know, what I think is really cool is that you had said energy, because since the beginning of 2017 to today, what has been your biggest focus in your business and in your life?
Yeah, it's not the business building stuff. It's the getting my own crap together stuff. And it has to be. And I keep fighting it. You know this. Like, I don't know if anybody else can relate to this, but every time I start to feel better, and I do feel, well, it's been ups and downs. This last fall has been a little bit of a down, but it's a long process to recover when your body has been tanked as badly as mine has. And there's a lot of ancillary stuff that just takes a long time to clean out and shore up and all those things. And when I start to feel better, then I really want to go back to those old habits. I have energy, so let's put it out everywhere but where I need to be putting it, right? Let's do all the things and set up all the things and push the business and go on trips and all the stuff that eventually I tank again. So it's a very long learning process. And Tamara continues to laugh at me because she's like, why are you still learning the same thing?
Which I would never say, people. I would never say.
No, she would never say that, but you very gently are just like, okay, we're still talking about the same thing. Okay, let's keep talking about it until you figure it out. And it's for some of us who identify more left brain, getting in touch with the whole system and really opening the door to the other pieces of who you are as a person is a challenge for sure. And so those old habits, those stress eating habits, and not stress eating, but like, you know, being addicted to the stress habits and the just go kind of stuff, is I'm learning to take steps back and just watch and pay attention and just kind of be like, well, that's really interesting. There I go again. Okay. I have to buckle back down to meditation and being quiet and recognizing that there's other stuff in my life than just.
And that's what I kind of want to ask, because I know that there are going to be other people who are secretly hiding their serious non-wellness, if you will, because, you know, Liz talking about, I just want to honor you for sharing your Lyme story, because I know it's not an easy story for you to tell, A, and B, I know that it's not something you want to associate with your business, but it is a partner in your business right now on in some way, right? Like it definitely sets, you know, boundaries with you. It definitely creates, you know, structure in how you can show up. It's a part of the decision making.
It is, for sure. And it's actually not, in some ways, it's not a bad thing. But to go back to the sharing of it, I do think it's part of the reason I wanted to talk to you on the podcast about this was because there's so much stigma, whether it's mental illness or it's chronic illness or whatever label we want to put on it. Right. For me, I have this deeply seated belief that I'm working on that says, if I don't show up as a strong, capable person 100% of the time, my clients won't appreciate and respect and trust, because trust is very important in the work that I do, trust that I am capable. It's a story. We've proven that that's a story, but there's also this societal piece of that too, of, you know, there's something wrong with you, therefore you're not whole, therefore you're lesser than. And that's a really big message that I'm working a lot on right now around, can I show up authentically as myself, including talking about my Lyme in my life, and still run a successful business without feeling like I have to prove it over and over again. Because there is this sense of, okay, if I talk about having this chronic condition, when I, work with clients, they all understand and they know, and it's okay to push a call if there's a particularly bad day, and everybody's very understanding, but I don't want the pity, and it's really hard to marry how do I talk about this, but from a position of strength, not feeling like everyone's kind of going, oh, we feel so bad for you. Because nobody wants that. Like when you're in that position, you don't want people to tell you that. You just,
No.
you want to be able to be authentic, but it's a balancing act, I find.
Right. And what came through right there is like, we don't want to come across as the victim in the scenario of our, life, whether it's, I have anxiety, you have Lyme disease, or however else, even, things that are happening with our families or with our finances or with anything. We don't want to come across as being victim of our circumstances, because
finances that comes up all the time. I'm in a really unique position because I get to talk to people, and people do, I find, open up and are comfortable enough to open up to talk a little bit. And when they do, so much stuff comes out around that discomfort of, I am going to be perceived as a fraud if I talk about my money situation, which I totally understand. I'm not saying that people should go out and not everybody's comfortable sharing stuff, and that's appropriate, but they're also not comfortable even sort of diving into it for themselves internally, because there's so much stress and anxiety around it. Like, if I open this can of worms, the shit's going to hit the fan. And I've felt the same way around sharing my Lyme story a lot. But we all know that when we open the can of worms, that's where the real good stuff is too, I think.
Well, and I think that that's where true connection occurs, right? Like, that's the place in which, we can break down a wall enough for somebody else to see who we are, and, they can see like a mirror, have themselves reflected back and see an alternate option, right? So whereas you may see yourself as, and I see myself as, or somebody sees themselves as weak because of something, right? Somebody else who is not where we are on, this, like how far we've moved our business, or how can have the same thing and look at us and see us as strong, even though we have Lyme disease or anxiety, or, have made money decisions that have not supported our business. So I think it's honoring the fact that we can give hope and strategies and really reach back and say to somebody, I see where you are, I know where you are, I honor where you are, and let me tell you, sister, brother, let's pull you to this place where I am.
Which I think you do really well. In my position, it's fun because I get to work with clients of sort of many multiple stages of business growth, which is entertaining for me because I get to use different pieces of my knowledge base at different spaces. But right now I'm so intrigued by this conversation around the facade versus what's really going on. And you and I have talked about it as sort of this external focus versus the inner work. And in that way, I think that what we do with people and how we help people is very similar, because there's so much around I have to present a certain way. And this shows up in business a lot, right? So we see people out there who look like they're doing awesome and they're making a gajillion dollars, and not all of them are, but you don't know because you don't have a window into the inner workings in their business.
No, and those people are the ones that are at all the events sometimes, and they're showing themselves, you know what I mean? Because we are in that space, because I've been this person, right? Last year I was this person in the spend more than I was making category. Mm-hmm. And, from the outside, I mean, my business did exceptional. I made $327,000 in my business, but I was spending more than that to make that money. And I was doing it in a way which looked really exceptional to the public eye.
Yeah. And to be honest, to be fair to you, there is and for anybody out there who might have gone through this or is going through it now or sees it on the horizon, there is a certain stage in business growth where the business starts to, you get to this point, you start to make some money and you're like, I can do all the things, right? And it's kind of a sticking point. And really the 300 to 500K I've seen is being that point where you're like, I actually am putting less in my pocket than I was when I was only working with 10 people at a time. And so it's the building of the infrastructure. Some of it is growing pains. But what I think is interesting is I parallel this to something that I've been hearing a lot just in the last couple of weeks, which is when I'm seeing people I haven't seen in a while, over the holidays, for example, or I just had a call with somebody I hadn't seen in a while. And the response is, you look great. which is really hard to hear. And maybe you can relate to this around the business side of things. It's really hard to marry that when you're looking great on the outside, but feel like shit on the inside, and you feel like shit on the inside. There's a massive disconnect, and there's guilt and shame and like just sort of confusion around that. Like, because you want to be seen for who you really are, but you also know that people on the outside, often we get the message that people actually don't want to know the details, right? They just want to be like, we want to be able to be like, Liz is doing okay. That makes us feel better. And so when you're the person who's sick on the inside, whether it's physically or otherwise, it's easy to want to placate them. And I think this is where the like energetic, empathic thing comes in too, because we want to caretake their needs around. It's easier for them to think, Liz is doing really well, and to want to be like, you know what, yeah, things are getting better, and just kind of maintain that storyline. But it's at a detriment to how I feel inside, or how you feel inside, or how anybody like in that position feels, for whatever causes that feeling, because it's my reality isn't what somebody else is seeing. And I don't know. How do we change that? And you don't know what to do with that, right? Like, and you also know that it's not like you don't necessarily want to get into the details with that person or share that stuff with that person.
Right.
Like it's finding a way to kind of release the need to just to let that go, I guess. I haven't found any other way to deal with it.
And I think this is truly an important conversation to have, because, it is one of that recent posts I have, like when people would be saying, your business is doing really well. And I would be like, yeah, it is. Right. But inside I was like, I'm failing at my business.
I know.
So it's different. So like, it's that shift in conversation. So how do we, get to a space where we can have the conversation about what is truly going on in a way that isn't from a victim perspective, or doesn't showcase us from a victim perspective, but is honoring where we are in such a way to support and care for other people and where they are in their journey.
Do you think, because where my brain goes is it says we pick and choose who and how we dive into it, right? Like not everybody wants to know or needs to know, right? Like, so we want to pick and choose an audience that is, a warm audience, is somebody, what's the word I'm looking for? They care about us, right? Like we want to be exploring that with people who aren't going to just immediately like make you feel worse about
shut down and be like, right. Oh my God, they're talking to me about their things.
Right. Like that kind of stuff, I think. But
I want to have a conversation with you, friend to friend, here on a really live podcast, but that's cool. Because we both did this last year, and I'm going to call us both out on something big. And we didn't even use each other, you guys. Like we have been friends, close friends from that first messenger, I like your energy comment. But, as Liz was going down with her health last year, like in the fall, like you really, and I think truthfully, I think that, and we didn't talk about this, you got clearance to say you didn't have Lyme, which felt really good. And it gave this sense of, things are going to get better. And then it came back. Mm-hmm. Right? And how does one handle that when one extreme to the other? Right? So you started to kind of pull and retract away, and our business relationship kind of had to go away in March because we had smeared lines of friendship and business. And so I lost that connection to my financial kind of pillar, and I started to retract. So here we have two really close friends who are going through really intense things and not even feeling like we had the capacity to talk to each other. And I think that's the conversation, is like, when we don't allow ourselves to retreat so far that we truly believe that we don't have somebody to talk to.
Yeah. And it's a super lonely place and super easy to kind of slide into unintentionally when you're in that much discomfort. Because two things happen. One, you don't want to be a burden to the other person. And two, it's not having even right. Like it's very complicated, but energetically it just gets really mucky, and it seems easier on the surface to just withdraw, which I have the tendency to do anyway, and I think you do as well. Not everybody, like other people might have dealt with this situation differently than you and I did, but because we're so similar in a lot of baseline ways, we both were like, okay, we're just going to pull back entirely. Which wasn't
I'm going to bring that up to, being empaths and being, highly sensitive people, in the sense that, if we're talking about where we are or hardships or things, we just automatically will feel the other person not wanting to listen or not wanting to hear, or assume it, or place an energetic attachment to something that doesn't exist yet, right? And so, we don't want to put that feeling on somebody else.
Right. Right. And that's where I think, the work that you do with people is so important, because business building is fucking hard. I mean, it doesn't have to be. There are plenty of people who don't connect with whatever that side of themselves is and build successful businesses, and they don't need to, and that works for them in whatever ways. But so many people swirl in a bad way in the process of getting where they want to go. They have a big vision, they have a big dream, and there's the energetic part is major. It is for me. I mean, thank God we met. I would never have opened up this part of my life, and I would have just stayed stuck. And I'm very aware that working on my energy and connection to spirit, source, universe, God, whatever you want to call it, is an amazingly important part of my recovery. And when I'm not doing the practices, and when I'm not focusing on that part of my life, I, consistently, I've done this enough ups and downs that I see that the downs happen pretty consistently when I'm not on track with that, when I'm not giving that time in my day.
And I think that happens. I see that happen with most people, right? We are the business. Our human body is the business. When you are a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, even with a small team, keeping yourself at the highest vibration and frequency that you possibly can becomes the actual capacity for the business to do anything, right? And because I like to parallel, the work that we do, it's exactly the same thing with our money management, which is all of it is interrelated, because if we're not paying attention, if we're not giving it the time that it deserves and the thought that it deserves, it is going to be willy-nilly, and it's never going to feel solid and really get you to the next level. And it's completely the same thing with energetic work, and however that shows up for different people, right? It's critical to be not only successful, but confidently successful. And I actually want to talk about something right now that you've done that I think is really, really helpful for an entrepreneur. And that is, you actually created a way for them to know what kind of person they are at each level of their business, right? And I think that this is a really cool way to kind of introduce, your personal finance, your business finances, and how you show up in your business. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So that came out of my second book, the Zen Money Map. And as part of that, so as I've been working with people, I really realized that, because the way my brain works, I'm like, we just do the things and we're done. And the more people that I worked with, the more I realized that there were kind of types of people, which we're calling archetypes, financial archetypes, in terms of how they, their comfort level with numbers and financial management, or discomfort with it, how they want to grow their business versus not. So I developed a series of, as in writing my book, it became clear that, this was something to talk about. And so in my view, and there's lots of different ways out there in the world, but in my view, there are 5 different financial archetypes for entrepreneurs. And they run the gamut between people who are supremely confident, good to go. Maybe they need a little bit of education along the way, just as they ramp up, as they're thinking about their business management, but, really aren't interested in full scaling, things like that, to the, person who just hides in the hole whenever the statements come around. And these days it's super easy to ignore your statements, because before you just throw them in a drawer, and now you just delete the email or, put it in the trash. But we're on the spectrum. And so knowing where you are on the spectrum can alleviate a lot of anxiety around your money management, because you can just be like, oh, right, my inherent approach to my money is this. So now we can let the other stuff go, being like, oh, I should be working like this type, but really I'm this type. And so if you know what it is, it's that much easier to establish a system and an approach to your money management that's going to feel good to you. And for me, that's really important, because the ticky-tacky stuff, the analytical, like where do the numbers go and making everything tie out and getting books balanced, is really just one small piece of the puzzle. Because ultimately, for you to feel successful, you need to feel good about what's happening with your money management. And there's a bunch of different ways to be successful. So let's just find the one that fits best with your personality type.
See, and I found this brilliant, right? Because I found it brilliant because you then, for me, I had an understanding that me not wanting to do the actual large numbery, QuickBooks, all that kind of stuff would never be who I was as a financial archetype. And it gave me the permission that was required to feel like so confident in giving that away, because it really just allowed me to focus on the areas of my business that I did thrive. So I'm so grateful for you for creating this. I think it is just going to make a huge impact in the life of any entrepreneur, whether you're just starting or, well established, to understand these concepts. So for all my beautiful entrepreneur friends who are listening, where do they go to get this information? Because it's a game changer. It's a life changer.
So it's really easy, because it's like 2 minutes, and it's a little quiz. And then once you take the quiz, you'll know what your archetype is. And there's a bunch of other fun information for you to take and run with. But you can just go to lizlajoie.com/quiz to get started. It's really easy. And that's LIZLAJOIE.com/quiz.
Zed, just kidding. LIZ, I was going to say, just because I'm Canadian. I'm just playing. But this will be in the show notes, you guys. Oh, me and my Canadian humor, you know how it is.
Canadian humor.
So guys, absolutely 100%. This is something that will be really impactful for you to take, to really have a clear understanding about you in your business as a financial cheerleader, because nobody else will be your financial cheerleader but you.
We think there will be somebody, but it turns out there's not. So let's make sure you're doing the best you can for you.
100%. And I know that if they go to lizlajoie.com, they will also see all the other magical things that you have created. Her business name is Zen Money for a reason. And that is because Liz really makes finances flow. And I'm going to say easy, and I'm going to say easy with love, because you take the fear away. And I'm so freaking grateful for that, because if it weren't for you, I wouldn't be able to have these big conversations about my finances.
It's an up and down for all of us, but I think that's what I've realized is my superpower. If we want to talk about energy, is just being able to create a space where, in a calm, easy way, we can just talk about the reality, because it's not that complicated, but it can feel overwhelming, and it doesn't need to.
Okay, now my favorite question. You dropped the bomb that you have always been a big book nerd, just like me. And so I like to think about collecting, books for not only myself, but my readers, for when they get the vibration when somebody says something. So the first answer is the right answer. If you were to let the listeners know one book that absolutely changed your life, first answer, Liz.
God,
what book came to mind?
This is where my brain doesn't always work. It's on my bookshelf. 100 Years of Solitude. There we go. Gabriel Garcia Marquez is a fantastic magical realism book. You thought I was going to say something like businessy. No, I love that. I
didn't know what you were going to say at all. I can never get into that kind of thing.
I was like, once again, I don't make assumptions, right? Okay. 100 Years of Solitude is probably one of my favorite books of all time.
100 Years of Solitude. And what makes you love it so much?
It's magical realism. It's this long, expansive, intertwining story by a wonderful, wonderful author, and you should just check it out if you haven't read it. It's one of those top 100 books everybody should read kind of books, and so if you haven't, you should.
Awesome. I love that you just shared that, because I'm going to put that on the list. I want actually to a list for all. And I am so grateful for you sharing all parts of yourself today with myself and with my listeners. It truly is an honor. And I love you as a friend and as someone who I'm walking side by side in business, and somebody I know that will be in my life forever.
I love you too.
I love you.
Thanks for having me. It wasn't too scary. It was good.
Yeah. I always try and scare my guests. I'm like, we're going to go deep. And they're like,
I don't know what that means. Crap. No.
All right. Have a magical day, everybody listening. And you can tune in on Monday for Magical Monday download drop.